We are going bush on Going Bush now, Nick, in search of some cultural heritage.
Quite an amazing thing we're about to look at, Hardy. We're in the northeast of the state, and this area, 120 years ago, was teeming with miners, specifically Chinese tin miners, and there is a remnants just up ahead.
What are you going to do with that?
Bush knife in case I have to cut my way in.
What are you...
This is a story that started more than 120 years ago. Back then, in the small northeast community, some 3,000 Chinese tin miners lived and worked, hoping to strike it rich. Nowadays, though, there's really no visible signs of the mining boom, which lasted almost 20 years.
This modest campsite next to a stream was left hidden in the thick northeast bush until now retired forest planner Sean Blake was given the job to assess the area for a forestry coup. What he found was a small insight into another world.
I came up here on the bank and walked around, and I saw the chimney butt, as they're called, the stone support for the hearth. And and then I saw artefacts lying on the ground, and I thought this is quite exciting because I'd never found one undisturbed before.
He was very excited because most of the Chinese sites have been found, bottle hunters had already destroyed. And in Sean's long experience in the area, this was the first one that hadn't been hit by bottle hunters.
Because the Chinese walked all their own supplies to the site, all of which, except for the odd beer bottle, were from China, this undisturbed mining camp had hundreds of hidden secrets.
We looked at it for a long time, thinking we'd like to manage it without excavation, an archaeological excavation. But given the activities of the bottle hunters, it was finally decided that removing material and taking it to the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery was the best option for long-term management of the site. And in the meantime, we learned a lot about how the Chinese miners or men lived out here in the bush 100 or 20 years ago.
With the bulk of the mining being carried out in winter, conditions out here were extremely difficult, Nick, and that's maybe explains why you find things like this. I'm informed that if you were to send this to CSI, they'd find traces of opiate.
Yes.
Drugs, Nick.
Indeed, Andrew, and not that we're condoning that. No. This also is the remnants of a whiskey jar.
Drugs and booze.
Indeed. So the Chinese, they were doing it tough, but they were finding some time to kick up the old heels.
These people are not here to be colonists. Very few stayed. They wanted to go back to China and be mandarins. They wanted to earn lots of money, get the nice pretty wife, the big house in town, and be important in the village.
The mine site remains protected today because of legislation which protects areas of cultural significance from being harvested. The same legislation protects threatened species and other special values.
A forest officer, like Sean was at the time, makes the discovery, reports it back through Forestry Tasmania, goes to Forest Practice Authority, and eventually a reserve is put in place.
The intact bits from this discovery are now all on display at the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery. 20 fish boxes of Chinese artefacts were removed in all displayed alongside a Chinese temple which was put together by the miners so they could worship their ancestors.
Chinese visitors have told me like that would be millions of dollars to buy today. So these men must have been earning quite a lot of money. Like one fellow wouldn't do it by himself, but if he was in the House of Qin, all the Qin people would put in to buy these objects for worshipping the ancestors in the temple.
Forestry Tasmania's forest practices officers often survey a planned coop from the air before undertaking a detailed on-ground assessment to determine the natural and cultural values of the area.
Once identified, a detailed plan is prepared to minimise impacts on those values. A plan typically might include reserves to provide habitat for wildlife, to protect water quality in streams, to protect threatened species including wedge-tailed eagles, and a range of special measures to manage the unique characteristics of the site.